you keep the ecosystem's entire, profit, and you'd be able to reinvest that and create more engagement on the media side, but make the media property a lot more profitable because it is attached to the best way to monetize a sports audience.
This podcast is sponsored by Pragmatic Solutions, the player account management platform chosen by today's smart betting and gaming operators. Don't let technical constraints delay you from achieving your business goals. Expand your business, boost your margins, and dominate the market in any leading regulated jurisdiction with our powerful, flexible, and secure iGaming platform. Enjoy its extensive marketing tools, compliance protection, real-time data, and a wide portfolio of over 1,000 industry providers. It's time to upgrade your technology. Let Pragmatic Solutions show you the modern approach. Visit pragmatic.solutions and join the smart thinkers.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
And bingo, bango, bongo. We are live here with industry legend and CEO for LiveScore Group, Sadi. How are you doing today?
Hi, Pierre. Thank you for the flattering introduction. Very happy to be here.
I mean, it's not that difficult to see the company you're representing here, of course. For those who are watching the video, Sam is well branded and representing his company well here today.
I have it on the sleeve as well, if you don't mind.
I like it. I like it. A brand enthusiast. That's what we like here at the Next.io podcast. I've been really excited to record this podcast with you, Sam. Of course, you've been in the industry for a very long time and one of the true pioneers of this space. And so there's a lot to talk about today, and we kind of distilled this into, let's say, 4 industry trends to pay attention to from your perspective. But before we jump into that conversation, I just wanted to kind of ask you about the background yourself, Sam. You've been in the industry for a long time. Can you take us from the beginning? How did it all begin many, many moons ago? How did you enter this space?
Sure. It's actually an easy topic to talk about because it's very simple. Like, I've been doing one single thing probably for the last, now it's like 30 years. So it started at the university in Boston. I got interested in sports betting because my roommate was a bookie. So I was seeing him taking all these calls, and I was learning about sports betting. And I was passionate about sports. I was passionate about math. So certain things clicked immediately at that point, and then it just never stopped. Like, when I finished school, a few years later, the internet was coming along. I was an engineer, so it just was natural that, I take those two passions and put it together and launched one of the, first sports betting sites in the world. Naively, I went after my home market, which was Turkey at the time. All my peers went after the US, Europe. They created, multi-billion, empires, whereas I tried to dominate my local market. Can't say it didn't work. Turkey's a pretty big market now, but it was still, quite substantial in the beginning. Got noticed by Bwin, the company we know as Entain today, acquired in 2002. And then it was a long journey, in that business. Bwin was quite small at the time that they acquired my business, and we grew to incredible heights. All the way to being the number one in the world for a long period of time. And that, went on till 2016, at which point I was thinking, okay, this may be it, people are starting to label me as a dinosaur. Maybe it's time to retire. So I was, roaming around beaches in Mexico thinking, I'd open a restaurant and just chill. Yeah, exactly. Pursue some different passion. work-life balance and all that. But then came this amazing connection and opportunity with Gamesys, as you would know, quite a successful online slots and bingo company, primarily in the UK, and they wanted to get into sports. I had this, vision that I had not been able to pursue at the end at Bwin. I wanted to put together media and betting together, create an ecosystem where, there's a different level of engagement around content, and that would be removing all the inefficiencies between, sports media and sports betting, which I've witnessed, in the past 20 years. And they decided to back this vision, and I've had the fortune to be able to pursue something completely new from the ground up, built around a vision that I had imagined pursuing for like almost 10 years, but I hadn't gotten to. I just couldn't find the right team or the right venture or the right capital for it. So it's been an amazing journey. Like, we're on year 6 now, and it's been obviously very enjoyable because I'm pursuing something that I have a strong belief in, and to see that now it's succeeding and it's gotten to this point is very satisfying.
Yeah, brilliant. Just before you continue, Sam, I picked up on you're Turkish of origin?
Half Turkish, half Italian. Yes.
Okay.
Born in Turkey, Italian mom.
All right, so you speak Turkish then, I suppose.
Yeah, I do speak Turkish in case you want to switch to it. And
yes, please. Can I test my Turkish abilities with you?
Absolutely. Do I need to grade it?
Okay. Yes, please. So merhaba.
Merhaba.
Annem babam nasıl? Okay, well done.
Say again, sorry. Annem baban nasıl?
Annem babam nasıl?
That would be asking how your parents are.
Yes.
And I don't know how your parents are. But my parents are well, thank you.
Okay.
If that's what you meant.
Yes. Okay, so I get a 2 out of 5, I suppose. Something like that.
Yeah, just one letter off that made a difference.
Okay, I have a Turkish ex-girlfriend who would not be so proud of me if he heard that, in other words. But yes.
Okay. Courageous attempt, though. Yeah, I give you credit.
Thank you so much, Tom. All right. Jumping back into the discussion. So LiveScore, of course, the company that Gamesys acquired in and around 2018 and then divested from, that you're leading today, has a similar, let's say, long history as yourself, right? It was founded in the end of the 90s, LiveScore, and the idea that to track games and so on, and turned out to be a pretty good decision at that point. Can you just briefly go through the history of LiveScore as well?
Sure. So it was founded in 1998 by a passionate Man United fan who was residing in South Africa at the time, and the brilliant engineer, I believe, worked at Deutsche Bank, and he'd spend a lot of his weekends out in remote areas where he was like struggling to get any results of his beloved Man United, which in those days used to do quite well. So he built a system that would scrape teletext updates and deliver SMS updates to his own phone. And then his friend Sadi saw this and was like, well, we'd like to get SMS updates on our phone. And then this started going viral, if we could even say anything going viral in 98, but like within his social circles, everybody was like, yeah, we want SMS updates. So he actually built a system that was delivering SMS updates to all his friends on football results. And then at the same time, HTML technology advancing, internet obviously becoming widespread. So yeah, we registered LiveScore.com, built an HTML version of what he was doing using, again, the data sources from teletext, and created a website. And since then, it's been basically the category-defining leading scores app in the world. Obviously, iPhone came and the apps proliferated. A lot of competitors came into this space, and interestingly, his vision was keep things simple, don't change much, and probably from 98 to 2017. The app and the website didn't really change much. I mean, the logo was the same. The technology used was Delphi, which is a very old programming language that people from my generation know. It's based on Pascal, if that sounds familiar to anyone. So we had to, like, when we acquired it in 2017, it was, 6 people, 5 developers, 1 salesperson, very profitable, around, 5 to 6 million euros in revenues, but with quite outdated technology. So we soon discovered there's nothing we can do to improve this. It works. It has 30 million users who are happy with it, what it delivers, but it's stuck. Like it's going to be very difficult to compete in this space. And all the other scoring apps were, leaps ahead in terms of features, functionalities, etc. So our journey was from that moment on. We were building a sportsbook on the side. We started in 2017, and we also started building an entire new media backend that would support our long-term vision of, bringing these together, but also adding a lot more functionality and content into LiveScore. And that construction phase was basically 2.5 years. And then came to 2019, we launched the sportsbook, and then we launched the new version of LiveScore. And since then, we've just been building on top of that tech stack.
And what was the idea of launching a sportsbook that was branded LiveScore Bet? What was the synergies between the two? The idea was to send traffic, let's say, from the site, funnel it into LiveScore rather than operating as a traditional affiliate kind of thing.
Correct. I mean, it comes from a few necessities. So you've been obviously involved in our industry for a long time, and you see how the current traditional business models are under attack, under pressure. There's more taxes, more regulations, a lot more competition. Barriers to entry are in some cases much lower. So you need to start thinking, okay, how can I build a new sportsbook brand in a very competitive market where your rivals, the large ones, have spent, billions in the past decades to build up their brands, build up their technologies. So you need a different business model. And so you start looking at, how do you build a sportsbook brand? You have deep alliances with sports content. Sure, you got the Metas and Googles and you do performance marketing, but how do you build your brand? You need to build it by reaching large mass sports audiences. And throughout my career, I've done that with Bwin, and I understand how inefficient it is. There's a lot of leakage in the funnel between the sports audience and the sports bet. There are lots of intermediaries. You just don't have the same objectives. So you don't have the same, tech stack that you can optimize. So my view was that if you could bring these together under the same roof, in terms of the same company, under the same brand, and also under the same tech stack, you can remove all of those efficiencies. You keep the ecosystem's entire, profit, and you'd be able to reinvest that and create more engagement on the media side, but make the media property a lot more profitable because it is attached to the best way to monetize a sports audience. So the search was, what kind of media property would suit best to power this kind of ecosystem? And the easy answer is a LiveScore app. Because every sports bettor has a LiveScore app. They have to have it. Every fan doesn't have to have it because they can follow Arsenal on the official app, on the unofficial app, on BBC, on Sky Sports. But if you want to follow like multiple leagues, multiple teams, multiple sports, you need a Scores app. So under that assumption, we said, okay, we need to, pursue a Scores app. The first port of call is like, okay, can we go after the best one, most recognized one, with the biggest brand? And yeah, it worked out. We acquired LiveScore and our assumptions were correct. 2/3 of LiveScore users bet every week. So our job became, how do we convince LiveScore users who are betting somewhere else every week to bring their betting wallet, into the ecosystem? So the challenge is, what can we give them more that they're not getting today in the ecosystem? Is it value in terms of promotions? Is it convenience because they don't have to use multiple different apps to track their scores or to research their bets? Or is it just brand affinity, or is it just marketing conversion funnels? The answer is it's a combination of all those, that allows us to be the best sportsbook choice for LiveScore users. And by the way, just to conclude, 97% of LiveScore users don't bet with us still. But that 3%, because LiveScore is so big, allows us to become, an operator that can make, 200 million a year in revenues already.
Brilliant breakdowns, Sam. And I think it's good to kind of set the tone of the discussion here today, because we are talking a lot about kind of incremental improvement versus innovation today, and some of the topics that we have ahead of us. And particularly for a company like LiveScore that, as far as I understand, derives most of its revenues from a very difficult market in the UK, where, as you mentioned as well, it's become so much about finding those little pieces of additional margin that will kind of make or break a company. And it seems to me, in this sense, as you talk about that, in the UK as a market today, it's very difficult to just launch an operator, let's say, like just launch a sportsbook from scratch, but you have to then think about a unique business model that will bring you those users in a much more cost-efficient way. And that is the kind of situation in the UK market today, right? It's very, very difficult to be profitable, right? Like you have to either kind of be a legacy operator that built that brand perception over many, many years and been able to build efficiencies and scale, let's say, or you enter the market from left field like you did with LiveScore in order to fit in. That is kind of the reality of the market today, let's say.
100%. 100% accurate. It would be insane to think you can get any traction, and many have tried and many are still trying to get to the scale that you can be profitable and to be able to compete, because the incumbents are very strong. You have Bet365, you have the Flutter brands with Sky Bets, you have Entain brands, you have Evoke brands, and these are very well established brands, but not only, they have great technology resources, and they're constantly trying to innovate. They're constantly trying to get an edge. So you have to appreciate that you're going to be a challenger brand, and for a long time. And you have to say, well, what is my strategic edge? And we see our edge being twofold. As a sportsbook or as an online gambling company, we have a more efficient way to scale our business, to acquire customers, but also to retain them. Our retention rates are much higher than the industry because we're keeping everyone happy in the ecosystem. But also, we can also look at it from a media perspective. LiveScore as a media company, so the LiveScore Scores app, is a lot more profitable than any of its peers because we have the best in-house monetization. So we do still sell ads, but that business model is also problematic. Like the ARPUs of a traditional Scores app in let's say, the Western higher income world in the UK, potentially in the US or Western Europe, they range between 1.5 to, let's say, 3 euros per user per year. When we look at our ecosystem, and in the countries where we have LiveScore Bet integrated to LiveScore, we are maybe around like 7-8 times higher on an ARPU basis. And that's the power of having an integrated, embedded sportsbook experience into the media app. So it goes much further than an affiliate relationship of just sending, let's say, cost-effective traffic. It's all about, being able to give an embedded, smooth user experience, being able to deliver value based on how the user is behaving in your ecosystem.
Brilliant. So it's not just about the user clicking an ad and going from the app into a separate brand where there is no connection between the two, but it's rather to create that integrated experience between the app and the betting experience.
Yeah, because other companies have tried this. We've seen many media companies trying to launch in-house sportsbooks, thinking that they could just leverage their inventory and seeing that sportsbooks are succeeding on the other side and thinking, well, I want to grab some of that profit margin, but they underestimate how difficult it is to build and maintain a tier one sportsbook, and also they don't appreciate that you need to do something multiple times better for someone to switch. In a market that's saturated and not growing fast, you're asking customers who've been very happy with Bet365 or Sky Bets or one of those top brands to switch to something that they've never experienced before. So when they come, they'll be curious. You know, they like the brand, they may like the offer we give, but when they come in, they're going to compare you to, you know, something that they've been used to for potentially 5 years, potentially 10 years. Mm-hmm. So there's got to be something significantly better for them to come back for that second deposit. And, you know, people don't really appreciate that and think, if you look at the examples like ESPN, for example, you know, they think, oh, mega brand, you know, that should be sufficient. No, you need to be better than FanDuel and DraftKings because they are already customers of FanDuel and DraftKings. They've made that experience. You need to beat that experience. I'm not saying they can't, and I think that National understands that they need to. And if they do, it will work like magic. But it's not easy because those other guys have been building that tech for years or more than like 10 years.
And I suppose
so it's not easy to catch up.
I suppose this is the difference to some extent between being successful in the sports betting vertical versus the casino vertical, for example, where casino is a much more commoditized product where operators are offering the same games, right? So the experience
driven by content, yes,
driven by content. Whereas on the sports betting side of things, it's much more about the product experience, which is very different from operator to operator. On that note, on the sports betting side, so the most established sports betting and the most successful sports betting operators have crafted these incredibly well-produced experiences on the product side for over a long period of time. So new entries have a hard time to compete with that experience. But there's been this kind of like almost a counter movement in recent years, especially on the North American side, where some startups have said, wait, hold on a minute. Like when I go to DraftKings or Bet365, as a new user, as a first-time sports bettor, I am met with this like really complex information and kind of like it almost looks like a spreadsheet of difficult information to discern. So why don't we instead go back to basics and create just the easiest, simplest, most basic possible experience for the new novice sports bettors to be able to place a bet really easily without having to understand these different like odds mechanics and so on and so forth. What do you think about that approach, just going back to basics? Is it really that complex for new sports bettors as some think?
I have mixed reactions when I read comments describing, you know, what you said, like the sports betting product has become enormously complex. In a way, there may be an opportunity for more novice punters to be addressed with a simpler product. Someone who's never been exposed to the complexities of sports betting may initially have an easier time with this product, but I think we're shortchanging the customer's ability to adapt, the customer's intelligence. Like these products that are when you find that the established sportsbooks, you know, they're an evolution of you know, sports betting products, and the evolution has happened while monitoring, you know, all the customers' behaviors and demands and requirements. So people who are on the outside of the industry feel like we don't talk to our customers. We don't understand that many of them find our products, you know, very complex, and don't appreciate that these products have become complex on demand because, you know, the customers are very quick to understand and adapt new technologies. When the U.S. market opened, I was speaking to a CEO of one of the large companies who, you know, claimed that, you know, they were going to get 10%. I think you remember there was like 30 of them who wanted to get 10% market share in the market. Yeah. And he said we were pitching that, you know, you need to bring in the best in class, latest in sports betting technology to the market as quickly as possible. And their claim was, no, the U.S. market is simple. It's all about point spreads and totals and money lines. We don't need those advanced bet builders or in-play products or hundreds of markets and you know, short-term, you know, quick markets. That will take years for US bettors to embrace those different methods of, betting. How long did it take? I mean, if you look at the US products now, they're some of the most complex. I mean, the stuff you can do on FanDuel and DraftKings in relation to player props, they're ahead of like UK now because there is demand and people are just like picking this up. And, don't forget, like most of the punter audience, they're all digitally native now. They've grown up on mobile phones. They've grown up on apps. So they're very quick to understand. And if they don't understand it, there's something there, explaining it to them very quickly. So I think the simpler approach to it will always remain a niche to say, okay, well, I want to pick up people at the early part of their introduction to betting, because that person will most likely have someone next to that, him or her being an expert punter. And while that person is betting on a maybe player prop on a single match with a yes and no format, person next to him is like, well, you know what? You can actually decide, how many yards you want to bet over or under. Look at the slider on FanDuel. I actually make my own prop. And they'll be like, oh, that's cool. I don't have that. So then that other sportsbook is going to start understanding, oh, well, we got to really develop more complex products because our customers are maturing really quickly and, they'll leave us. That's not to say you can't pick up certain segments from the betting population, look at their behavior, and if they're limited to a certain type of bets, let's say, instant bets, or maybe they only bet player prop SGPs, and you can say, I want to build a better product just for that community. And that you can do. You can say, I don't care about people who bet in play. I don't care about casino players. I'm just going to target player props, and I'm going to offer a much better experience for that smaller segment. The market may be big enough to just say, I specialize in that. It's 10% of the market, and I want to get a share of that 10% of the segment. But often what you will find is that 10% is catered very well with a FanDuel that has everything. And they'll be like, well, that's a very profitable segment. We're not going to let this small operator, do it better than us. So they adapt and they'll offer anything that small operator also offers. So I know it's a long answer, but I think, and I'm contradicting your theory there, considering also how much scale you need, especially in the US, to be profitable. I can't see these small niche operators succeed. But I'm not putting the underdogs and price picks in that category because they're succeeding because of something else. They're accessible. They're accessible where there is no legal sports betting, and that's what's fueling their growth. Amazing products, but if you compare how an underdog and price pick does in a state where there is regulated sports betting as opposed to where there isn't, you'd see the difference in success. Where, customers have full access to a full sports betting product, there is a little bit of people who just say, I'll stick with price picks, but most of them are going to the bigger operators.
Brilliant, Sam. I want to stay on the US just for a tiny bit before we actually jump into our outline here today, but this is a super interesting conversation so far. On the US side of things, so the dust have settled on the market somehow, and we are left with two major incumbents in that side of the market, with DraftKings and FanDuel that own something like 80% of the entire sports betting market over there, and they are not shrinking their market share by time. And so it's become pretty clear that the business model of kind of funneling players from already established databases on the daily fantasy sports side, which was FanDuel's and DraftKings' origin, into sports betting has been a widely successful way of succeeding in that market. At the same time, there are a few challenger brands that have tried to disrupt the FanDuel and DraftKings. I'm thinking about ESPN Bet, as you mentioned before, with the idea that since they reach kind of like every sports interested person in America, they should be able to leverage that brand power and that reach to turn players into their product. And secondly, you can say Bet Fanatics as well, with Fanatics that have these massive databases that they built up from stadiums, people buying their merchandise on the sports side. And the theory is like with these massive databases and established brand, that we should be able to convert players into a sports betting product as well. So far, neither of the two have been able to establish any particular interesting market share. So I'm interested to know from your perspective, Sam, how do you disrupt DraftKings and FanDuel at this point? And considering that you managed to break in to the UK market, which is also a difficult market with LiveScore, with this left field entry, wouldn't the US be an interesting market to try to duplicate that success?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and we can target it from various different angles. I'll start with a fundamental misconception that you started your statement with, which attributes the success of DraftKings and FanDuel to their DFS advantage. I'm not saying that was not an advantage, but if other companies had that advantage but did not have the obsessive, product innovation approach of DraftKings and FanDuel and their, very sizable investment in marketing, they would not have succeeded. So sure, they had this massive advantage, but they had to keep those customers. And they've turned that massive advantage into market share because they were relentless in product innovation. They made some very important strategic moves. They made key acquisitions where it was needed. DraftKings immediately, bought its own tech stack, despite, you could argue that, they overpaid for it. But in hindsight, have they really overpaid for it? Because they were able to own their entire tech stack and innovate rapidly because they saw that FanDuel had that advantage and to be able to keep up with the latest innovation. So they embraced, product development and bringing products and features specifically developed for the market to keep that lead. So that's not a small challenge. Like, I agree with you. They started with a 40% market share advantage, but if something much better came into the market, how U.S. customers are. They'll go for the better product because there wasn't any loyalty. These are not 10-year-old, 20-year-old brands. These were just recently established as new DFS brands. So if somebody had come in at that time and with large marketing budgets like many did, Caesars, MGM, Bwin, and if they had a product on par with FanDuel and DraftKings, they would have been in the battle. So I think it's execution that is the reason why FanDuel and DraftKings are where they are right now, and the recognition that they need to keep that pace. Possibly because there's such a great rivalry between them that is pushing each other, to continuously innovate, make smart strategic, M&A to plug in, bolt in new technologies, new pricing models, and because there's that race to be number one, which is great to monitor from the outside. So yeah, you could argue, we came into the market in a similar place where Sky Bet and Flutter brands with Betfair and Paddy Power and Bet365 held a very similar 60-70% market share. That's why our initial ambition was we have to build a tier one sportsbook, which in terms of product experience for us means we do almost everything as well as the tier one operators. We do a few that we can't match them, and we have some that we do better. So that is like our positioning. Like our product has to match them at around 80% of the time. And there will be some things that, we can't match 365 or Sky Bet. Their brand strength, their breadth of content and the streaming. Great. Okay. Those customers we're not going to be able to compete with. But how can we find some stuff that they can't compete with? And that's the ecosystem. We can deliver an experience that they can't really compete with in terms of content engagement and embedded experience. And that's what, someone trying to penetrate the U.S. market right now would have to look at. And I do have to say it's pretty impossible. So, as ambitious as I would want to be to catch up to FanDuel and DraftKings in terms of product experience, whilst, being such an underdog in terms of brand recognition, don't forget access is very important in the US. So to have national access deals across all the 30 states that have regulated, and the high cost of operating. So you're going to need a lot of capital, even if you have a small strategic edge, even if your flywheel is turning a little bit faster than theirs in user acquisition, or maybe you have some operational capabilities that are better than them. Catching up and staying, head to head with them on technology, capital, and market access. Unfortunately, I can't see a small operator going in and this happens in any country where there is a lot of regulation. Like the market has to consolidate at the very top, and it prevents from small operators from entering. And we kind of see that now in every country that's dialing up regulation. The market starts consolidating and leaving customers with very few choices.
Yeah, the big gets bigger, and there isn't really any. Let's say in the US, that we can't even think of a possible way to disrupt DraftKings and FanDuel at this point.
Well, Fanatics, yes. I mean, you mentioned, they have an amazing user base that they reach through e-commerce. So you start with a good strategic advantage if you can, connect that to the rewards program, which they're doing really well. And, the difference is Fanatics and the team, whom I know very well, know really well what they need to do. And they're looking at this from a long-term perspective. And they start like us. We're like, we have to build a sportsbook that's just as good as them so that we can leverage the other advantages that we have. Penn National, when it's from the other way around. Let's buy Barstool because they have an audience. Let's buy The Score because they have an audience. Whereas on the sportsbook side, they try to take a lot of shortcuts. And I think they realize now they really need to invest to catch up on the sportsbook. They're doing okay in Ontario, or well, actually. And, if they can, plug in a FanDuel level sportsbook, with the advantages that ESPN Bet, brings, they'll start getting traction. But like I said, it's going to be difficult because ESPN and Penn National are different companies. Technology teams across two companies have different objectives, different priorities. The incentivization will not be there to maximize that ecosystem unless you fully own it. So again, quite a challenging landscape for the US.
Fascinating conversation here, Sam. I love that we laid the foundation for the following couple of trends that we're going to talk about really well here. And so let's jump into trend number one, as we discussed in our prep call here. So we are focusing as an industry a lot on Latin America right now. Brazil is on everyone's lips kind of thing. It's becoming more of an established market. North America happened a few years ago. Many of operators and supplier friends have tried and failed in that market. Some have succeeded. And one part of the world that perhaps isn't as discussed in the industry currently is Southeast Asia. But recently, and particularly not from a regulation point of view, but recently there's been a lot of movements there. So can you talk about why you mentioned Southeast Asia as one of the kind of hottest trends or industry trends to pay attention to right now?
Well, I mean, I'll start with the last part of your question. There isn't a lot of attention paid to that market because obviously there's no regulation. In most of Southeast Asia, online gambling is explicitly forbidden, banned by laws. And most, let's say, publicly visible and vocal companies, have had some like .com like white label operations there. They're aware of the size of the market, but they can't openly talk about it. But if you take, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia, we're probably talking about a market the size of the US. But can I prove that to you? No. Is there any industry data that can validate that? No. So if I were a public company CEO, I wouldn't be able to say, well, that's our estimate. But the B2B providers have very much visibility, and you'll see it in their reports, the revenues that they make. Of course, they're maybe, under a few layers, with like certain, B2B agreements, but, the amount of money that is being generated in that region, primarily on like live dealer casino products, but also on sports betting, it is tremendous. So, but why am I bringing this up? Because I think there's a new trend developing in the region and across these countries where the governments have realized this is unregulated, offshore-based online gambling is becoming a social issue. They're seeing too many of their citizens, spending amounts that they cannot afford. So their low-income segments spending too much, lured by, very predatory, unmonitored, unsupervised tactics, losing, like amounts that they should not be dedicating to betting. So whilst ideologically they're still against online gambling, they're coming to the realization that, to protect their citizens, and also to prevent this enormous amount of, hard currency outflow from their economies with no benefit, they need to start thinking about regulation. I think many other countries have shown that, it's the only way to combat the social problem that online gambling may cause. If there's no consumer protections in place, if there are no, RG measures in place. And I think in the West, we have proven that, responsible way and ethical way of operating is sustainable and it's possible if you find the right balance. So I think we're also increasing pressure from China towards these territories where, a lot of the outflow goes towards operators that, China is trying to prevent from, continuing, is going to lead towards a regulation, legalization movement. I don't know how long this will take. I don't know if it will ever happen, but the conversations are happening. Probably Thailand is, ahead of most of them. There's land-based regulation coming soon, I believe, already in place to allow like resort-style land-based casinos. So I think that's how it starts. You form a regulator. You first, regulate land-based, and then you start looking at, use cases where you see billions flowing out of the country, and then you look at the social ill, and the solution is, well, we may as well regulate this, keep this under government control, whether it's through licenses or state-owned operators, but that is the solution. And I think if it does go in that direction, there's going to be tremendous opportunities.
Yeah, brilliant. So several jurisdictions in Southeast Asia at the moment that are actively discussing to regulate iGaming and land-based gambling as well, which is something that we, of course, never really heard before from those territories, although, as you point out, we knew that that market is substantial, let's say.
Yeah.
Same on my side as well. I hear Thailand as an upcoming kind of first potential target market, even to the point where there could be iGaming regulation being announced even this year. Is even what I'm hearing through the grapevine. But as you point out, things can happen very fast, and until there is a decision made, a decision announced, we still have to wait and see for sure. The second trend that we highlighted in our prep call, Sam, is a topic that perhaps have been talked to death to some extent, which is why it's now important and interesting to resurface the conversation. Because Bill Gates has a good saying that whenever there's a technology shift in the world, people tend to overestimate the changes in the short term, but underestimate the changes in the long term. And the topic is, of course, AI. And you highlight that this is now perhaps the time where we will start to see this major shift taking place on an operational basis with AI as its cornerstone. So talk about the topic of AI without rehashing all the hype words and hype sentences that we heard in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to keep it contextual. And I fully agree with Bill Gates. We probably also don't understand the part that we are underestimating. So we definitely cannot project, how AI is going to transform any industry today. So I think the correct way to approach it from any company is, we need to acknowledge that this change is happening, and how do we strengthen our position by, raising the overall knowledge level of our entire company with everything that is available today, but in a way that keeps up with the changes that are happening. So in contrast to previous technological transformations, this is happening at a pace where like it's even too fast for our brains to absorb and to adapt. So the challenge that we're taking on in our company is, well, the technology is, going to transform everything in a way that we don't understand. So how do we strengthen ourselves to be able to move with it? So increase the level of knowledge of the entire business and then throw the challenge to all the teams. Here are all the tools that are available to you. Here is a knowledge center run by, a team that is there to support you. Question every day what you can do better with AI. Question every day what you can replace with AI. Question everything that you can remove with AI. Or see how you can do a lot more with AI. And finally, the most difficult part is there something that we're not doing today that we could be doing with AI? So then that comes to, is there a way to leverage the technology to deliver, different customer experiences? And, our approach to that is to try to leapfrog the obvious. So today, most people's understanding is that, ChatGPT or various different LLM-based products are a bit of a research or a search tool. You give it questions, it analyzes, gives you great feedback. So then everybody in the sports betting space is thinking, well, okay, I should ask, ChatGPT, what should I bet on? So that's the current simplistic thinking. We're thinking for the next phase of that. We're thinking, what can we feed into an LLM that will give us results that only we can generate, that then we can deliver to our customers? So instead of asking ChatGPT, go, and find every content available to you and tell me if, Man United are going to win, this weekend, or if a certain player is likely to score, which is available to everyone. So this is just the prompting. If you can prompt it, you'll get the result. So there's no point for the sportsbook or the media company to deliver you that content. It may seem valuable. It's like, okay, that's cool. They're telling me, Man United should win because they won the last 3 games and the other team is weaker. Great. Okay. It's a summary of okay, shorten your research a little bit. But what we want to do is, are there metrics that are currently being measured but not fed into LLM models? Can we, add a lot more complexity to that analysis, but what we're feeding needs to be proprietary and ours. So then the output is also ours. So you can't go to ChatGPT and query LiveScore's proprietary metrics. And these will range from, predictive XG models to, real-time momentum or power indexes. So we're creating this pool, which we're going to release in terms of, availability of these metrics. But then with these metrics, we want to deliver insights to millions of fans around the world, but also obviously to betting customers in the countries that we're in. That's what we're focused on. And again, I'm not saying this is the only area that online gambling could be focused on. There could be companies that gain an exponential edge in, their marketing efficiency. They could be supercharging their creative generation and experimentation on their digital marketing. There could be companies that are, developing much better CRM algorithms. We're developing RG algorithms so that we can detect, behaviors of harm a lot quicker and engage a lot quicker. So, almost every function, all the way going to, corporate services like HR and legal, has to think, I have an ability to supercharge myself, superpower myself. And I need to start experimenting with it and keep up with the latest developments. What we know of AI today is different, on Monday. There'll be a new model released or there'll be a new tool released. And our job is just to keep up and constantly make it our way of working. And when you see that being embraced, when you see every other email that comes to you that has some AI in it. It's like, hey, I've summarized this, using this tool, because everybody also wants to show off. So it's like, look at this competitor analysis I've done. Look at this report that now we generate every day on every competitor's, app store page. Look at this, how we keep up with who's releasing what. Look at all these marketing creatives and promotion campaigns in real time and then what's going to happen is you're monitoring today. Tomorrow, you're going to say, well, I'm going to design an agent that is going to monitor in market every promotion mechanic that is being rolled out and is active on digital media. And my agent is going to make sure that if I give it the instruction, make my offer 5% better than every other sportsbook offer during the Monday of Cheltenham. Imagine like the effort that it would take to monitor, adapt, publish new creatives, change the back end, and publish a new promotion, as opposed to an agent constantly doing that in real time. So it's about like all these labor heavy processes and people focus on potentially like executing. So like typical CRM execs, marketing execs. We want to elevate them with their knowledge to strategy positions and to start thinking, what kind of agent can I build to do everything I used to do, but do it 100 times more powerful and efficient? And then all my job is to design and keep up, developing these agents. So also empowering them with the technology and growing them in their professional career, in contrast to creating a fear that this is going to replace their work.
Yeah, that's a big one as well, right? Because I think there's maybe two cohorts of people, one of them being fearful and the other one seeing this as opportunities to take a step forward, right? And in the hiring process, perhaps it becomes more important to hire those who are kind of AI optimists, let's say, or those who lean in to work with AI. To develop
the fear is justified. The fear is justified, but even personally, I am taking that fear, and my fear is becoming obsolete. Already, because of my age, I always have to be paranoid that, I need to keep up with the younger generations. But, the fear of being easy to substitute. So, what do I turn that fear into a challenge? I say, okay, well, I need to make sure that, I'm 2 times better than I am yesterday. And that is a very good motivator, to embrace the technology.
Yeah, I was speaking to an IBM researcher and Stanford professor last time. I have a sister in Silicon Valley, so I get to meet like some pretty fascinating people from time to time. And he was talking about the research. He's an AI researcher, and he was talking about the research they are doing in kind of corporate structure. So like when we structure our organizations, it's a top to bottom pyramid, classical hierarchical structures that we've done for hundreds of years. But he talked about with the use of AI in the future that corporate structure might change quite dramatically. And, we are both MDs and CEOs here. So if you would make a case for how we would be disrupted, it would be the kind of AI leader who would remove this hierarchical structure. And instead, if you have an AI that is trained on your particular company and that understands your particular mission and vision really well, rather than having really set job titles and job roles and job functions, you can imagine that the AI is fed with problems to solve at any given time, and it will distribute these problems to whoever is most suitable to solve that particular problem at that particular time. So let's say that the AI...
Whether that's a human or an agent, it doesn't always have to be human. So it could be powering its own agents to deliver.
That's right. Let's even say the employees that you have in your company. The AI might understand how busy each of these individuals are at any given point and who has space to take on new problems. And then it will understand what are the best potential teams to take on a problem together, and creating task force and particular project briefs and so on. And then, boop, here you go. This is now your problem to solve. This is priority 4 out of your 17 problems that you're solving right now. And it will be essentially a much more flat structure of distributing problem-solving tasks by the AI in the future. So I guess that's the case, Sam, for us to be disrupted in the future. But let's see how that goes.
I think it will happen at every level. What you're describing is not. It's very easy to imagine. I can imagine it easier already on the product hierarchy. where you have tools that you can easily prototype an idea, make it fully functional, and then turn it into production quality if needed, or allow the tool to connect with Jira, write stories, distribute it to the engineering teams that have capacity, like you're describing, and be the best product manager that you can be times 50. So then what is the role of the vision provider? I suppose that's still very necessary, but have we just empowered that vision provider with a team of 50 product manager, and can a single person then feed, I was going to say 100 engineers, but probably 10 engineers at the power of 100 with the tools that they have to their disposal to code faster? Yeah. Or do they even start vibe coding everything themselves, and then you have these 1-2 person companies that are competing with 1,000-person engineering teams?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg thinks that within 12 to 18 months, the best AI researchers are AI themselves, right? So we'll have to see what future we live in the short period of time here. But I think Sam, we got to make sure to negotiate good share options programs right now while we still have the chance, then, right? So.
Great point. Before we get replaced overnight.
Brilliant. So jumping over to trend number 3, which is a kind of topic we're going to go full circle on. We discussed a little bit earlier, which is kind of not really a trend particularly, but more an observation with innovation versus incremental improvement. And so the iGaming industry, sports betting industries, you could say have evolved over the last 20 years by incremental improvements to their businesses. Like Bet365, the leader, is like a machine that just constantly gets a couple of % better every year, and it just does that year over year to maintain the edge. At the same time, smaller businesses are looking for innovation to find their space, let's say, in the industry. So I want to ask you, Sam, let's say innovation versus incremental business model. Which business model is superior in this day and age, if you could answer a big question like that?
Yeah, I think you have to appreciate it's a mature industry. So if we take gambling in general, even before saying online gambling, gambling has been around for decades. I don't know how far back in history it goes, but this isn't something that we invented as an online product. So it's just a different distribution channel. So we've converted, traditional established gambling products, including, sports betting, and you can still track back, everything we do today to land-based models that existed, from the coupon products, total products, and also, casino games on land-based casinos. So, this topic of innovation always comes up, but you have to also respect what's working. And, there is a need for disruptive innovation if you don't have a strategic edge and you can't compete, with the large established brands. So if I want to, launch a new brand today, I either have to find a strategic edge like we have done, but look, we have 3% market share, so we're not a disruptive company. We're grinding our growth through these marginal strategic advantages that we have that allow us to really gain traction. But can a disruptive technology come into market and gain 30% market share today? It's very difficult because you'd have to invent an entirely new product or derivative that's going to be more popular than what's been customary for decades. So even if you take the land-based example, has there been an amazing innovation around table games? Yeah, sure, there are variants of blackjack, and you have all these side bets and slightly different variations, but it's still blackjack, it's still roulette, it's still spinning a wheel, it's still throwing a dice. If you look at the slot machines, there's technology, coming into it, new game mechanics, obviously better compute power, so it's advancing, but this is what the customers have been used to. So it's not easy to come and say, well, I have a new disruptive format. You saw like fantasy betting, it should be the future. Young generations don't want to bet on teams and, they want to bet on players. Well, yeah, a segment of them, but like ultimately when they discover sports betting, they're like, well, this is pretty cool. And by the way, I can't bet on my players, but I want to also bet on the teams. So let's appreciate that it's a mature segment, and to disrupt a mature segment, you need a dramatic way of innovating to disrupt. So that's the answer. You have to, like the other model is incremental gains. So are you a little bit better in your marketing? Are you a little bit better in your trading? Are you a little bit better in establishing your brand? Are you a little bit better with your, ecosystem model? But major disruptive technologies, I haven't seen them. Like, has anything happened majorly disruptive in the last 20 years where a company has come in like an Uber and upended an entire, mobility industry, and taken, 80% market share? If you have the idea, you can certainly develop it for cheap now with AI, if you have that idea. But do I see it happening? At the moment, I don't. So also because of the high barriers to entry in terms of costs, so you need a lot of capital even if you have an innovative idea, and also the ease with which the incumbents will copy or absorb you. So it has to be so disruptive and so proprietary, and you need to roll it out so quickly with massive amounts of capital. So think Uber, SoftBank. Let's go in and burn, 10 billion in the UK market to disrupt because we have something that is better than Bet365. It has to be like ridiculously better, as was Uber with taxis. Like that was insanely better. Convenience, cost, subsidized with cheap capital. So they went in and just bullied themselves into the market with capital and subsidized drivers, and it created something entirely different. I don't see online gambling achieving this with the current levels of technology today. And again, probably I'll be proven wrong, and people will play this back and make a fool out of this prognosis. But yeah, I'm willing to take that chance.
Yeah, fair enough. So, I mean, if we look back in the last 15 years, so let's say since 2010 and onwards, if you were to point out like the inflection points of the industry or the big innovative products or changes or inflection points and whatever it may be, what would you point out? Let's say like the big.
Oh, there's some good ones.
Like yeah.
Okay, so let's go all the way to 1998. So okay, Intertops comes online. So that's obviously the first inflection point. People can access betting from their phones, but from their computers, from their PCs. So inflection point one. Then I would have to fast forward to maybe live betting or in-play betting as possibly the next inflection point. I was lucky to be at the pioneering edge of that with Bwin in I believe it was 2002 or 2004. There was a major tournament, and it was going to be played in a different time zone where people were going to be in the offices. So we decided we need a much more flashy, pun intended, built on Flash, interface that is entertaining, that can accommodate multiple players. And so we really took in-play betting to the next level. Another probably acceleration of that trend was the introduction of rich media into in-play betting. So first we were the ones to release audio and video for the first time. Now we're talking about like 2004, 2005. I'd say there's been a lot of development, obviously, in casino. Poker came along, so that's kind of made the ecosystems more robust. But inflection point, I'd say, in casino space with live dealer casinos, that changed that landscape quite a bit. On sports betting, the next big one has to be cash out. But again, to our point earlier, how quickly that was like copied by everybody else. So
that's the thing, right?
That was an amazing innovation, but didn't create, a disruption. So we're already at this level now, around 2010, past 2010, where it's very difficult. It's already like a mature segment. It's very difficult to disrupt. So you release cash out, everybody gets in. Maybe because you were first to market, you gain a couple points of market share. Same with request a bet. I think it created a lot of momentum in Sky Bet's growth, but how long did it last? Maybe like 1 year, a year and a half, until, in fact, like the next generation bet builders came in. It's like, okay, request a bet became obsolete. Now everybody wants to build their own bets. And I think that's pretty much the last one. I can't think of like anything outside of bet builder and SGPs, which are continuously evolving now, that we can't call it as inflection points, but like significant changes in innovation and technology in our segment. But feel free to add if I've missed any big ones.
Yeah, I think I worked for Betsson Group on the casino and poker side in the early 2010s, and the omni-channel approach and the shared wallet was a big shift that actually gave birth to this proliferation of game suppliers, for example, because we used to work with only 2 game suppliers in Betsson. It was Casino Red was NetEnt, and Casino Black was Microgaming, and those were the only 2 game suppliers at that time, because customers had to transfer money from their main wallet to their microgaming wallet.
So the single wallet was certainly a big step ahead.
Yeah, and that gave birth to then 500 game suppliers that we see today. It is the fact that you could have that seamless integration. But outside of these type of innovations, as we point out, like these are they like an innovation like that will shift the path of the industry, and it will give birth to a new vertical of companies and suppliers and so on and so forth. But where we are today, perhaps then we don't see these like tectonic shifts in the industry, or where like you go from PC to mobile, for example, that changes the industry. Let's say.
Yeah. Exchange, we all thought had the potential, betting exchanges, but it never materialized. If you asked me at the time they were, becoming popular, I probably would have said the good thing that there were no podcasts at the time, because I'd probably be on record to say that is going to be the future of betting, and all the other bookmakers are going to be like, stockbrokers that feed into a single system. That never happens. So yeah, it's these, incremental gains. You see companies like Superbet or Dabble, again, taking the model and creating a social layer to it. So what is that doing? They're giving them that strategic edge that we're talking about. So it'll give them 2 points extra on their retention. It'll give them, maybe 10% more efficient user acquisition because of the virality of it. It'll create maybe more ARPU because, there's a lot more engagement around the social community. But, Dabble is coming into the UK. They're not going to get 30% market share. They're going to get, they're going to be successful at 3%, and then go from there. And at some point they're going to say, hey, we're going to aim for 10%. And they're going to be able to do it probably because of their more unique approach to sports betting. But if you come into the market today and just say, hey, I'm just another sportsbook, there's not much room for you to make any noise and gain any momentum.
Yeah. Interesting, Sam. So moving over to the final point of today, which is trend number 4. We talked about regulation earlier, Southeast Asia regulating of the point of protecting the local population from the black market. We know, of course, in Europe that there's a prevalent black market, even though regulation does exist in many jurisdictions over here. So I want to just raise these questions as we talked about in our prep call. How do you genuinely beat the black market? They obviously don't have the same constraints as the regulated market operators have to deal with. Their margins are not as squeezed, which means that, of course, they can offer the customers better offers than the regulated operators can. So seemingly, the black market operators are moving with many fundamental major advantages. And in markets like the UK, where, as we talked about earlier, margins are so squeezed that just a tiny little advantage will proliferate throughout the entire business. The black market seemingly are operating with great advantages, let's say. So I want to just ask you to kind of summarize the black market and the whole kind of situation between regulated and unregulated environment today, and just make a case for how do the regulated side of the industry win.
You could simplify it by saying, by not doing anything that we're doing today in terms of our approach to regulation. But I think you'd want a little bit more detailed than that. First of all, we don't want to sound hypocritical, right? Like have been at the start of the industry where we were labeled, black markets or offshore operators, and all the land-based, retail sportsbooks and casinos. We're not to today's levels of regulation, but we're regulated and we're taxed, quite heavily. So they were like, well, the offshore operators have an advantage. They're not taxed, they're not regulated, they can distribute their content, through laptops, PCs, and we're stuck with our, corner shop. So that's unfair. We need to, level the playing field. And we were on the other side saying, well, we're on the internet, we're the pioneers, we're the innovators, join us or, get left behind. But, the contrast is we never claim to be like geniuses of marketing or innovative disruptors. We said we're just making accessible a product that is available on the shops, and we're doing what Amazon is doing to retail. And, Amazon did not invent commerce, did not invent retail. They didn't even invent e-commerce. They just had better logistics, and then they made sure that they can deliver something in a day, at good prices. So they did something slightly better than everybody else, and then they scaled from there. So let's look at today. The only way, in my view, to combat any type of black market product is to make your regulated market product competitive. So it's not just in our industry. In any industry, whether that could be pharmaceuticals or tobacco or alcohol, if the product that's widely accessible to customers is not as good, it's much more expensive, or it's not as, feature rich than the equivalent in the black market, the customer will choose the black market. Sure, you can slow that down with enforcement. You can tell the customer, well, that's illegal, don't do it. Some people say, okay, if you say so. But most will be say, yeah, but it's a lot cheaper. I'll still go for that. I'll get away with it because, I want to get the better product. I want to pay less for it. And, we see this with piracy, like if the experience in streaming sites are, $10 a month and you have to pay $150 for a similar product, how are you going to stop the customer from choosing that? So that's number one. And I think we lose track of that. With a little bit of with smart regulation, what potentially the UK has done for 20 years, you can still be competitive because you're giving operators market access through, exposure. So a regulated operator in the UK can advertise, used to be able to, freely, can, sponsor teams, can be much more accessible in, showing offers on Google, on Meta, whereas an offshore operator doesn't have access. So it's a balance, it balances things a little bit. So the offshore operator can have a bit higher margins, can have maybe slightly better products because, they can innovate a bit more, you could say irresponsibly, but I can advertise. So most of the public will come to me, and when given the choice, would you like to buy this 10% cheaper and slightly better from the offshore operator? They'd be like, no, I'm fine with the nice, polished, legal operator that I see on TV every day. So that's the problem. What regulators are doing now is they're tilting the balance too much. And so what's happening is if I'm being taxed, effective tax, 50% plus, because it's 37% plus on GGR. So on NGR, I'm paying effective tax rate of 50+% in the Netherlands. I can't compete with an offshore black market operator who has no friction to acquire customers. They can't go on TV and tell them, but I can't go on TV and tell them because there's advertising restrictions. So I can't advertise properly. I can't bonus them properly. I can't develop the full feature set that I would be capable of doing. And on top of it, before I make any money, more than half of it is, due to taxes. But what, we also don't calculate is I have to employ, 50, 60 people in compliance to keep up with the regulatory demands of Netherlands. I'm using that as an example of extreme case.
Yeah.
So, we were very bullish about the market. We were one of the 10 that first got licensed, and, we have hundreds of thousands of users on LiveScore. So we said, well, this is going to be a good market for us, because their initial objective was channelization. They said, we want to move the gray market legal. So, great. That's what you should be doing. And then we bring all the consumer protection with us. But and they miscalculated. They came up with stats like, only 10% is going to, the black market. But then now they realize that 10% makes more than 50% of their revenues. So they've pushed away the most vulnerable, the highest spending customers to unregulated, in some cases, unethical operators. Operators like in the UK who, advertise saying no GamStop casino, come here, no KYC, ultimate bonuses. So I hope they see this and not ignore it as something that, well, they don't need to worry about, because, they're beating the drum that, they're protecting the consumer and they're implementing all these rules, and appreciate that, they're moving the problem somewhere else. And again, with this, I also want to debunk a myth that, the stakes of this world, the similar operators of this world are winning this because they're innovative and, they are marketing geniuses. They are growing at this pace and are able to do amazing things in marketing because they're getting this free flow of customers, the most profitable segment of customers, pushed towards them. So all the top 20% of, high value customers in the UK are currently betting at black market, sites. So yeah, sure. If I had that flow coming to me without, doing anything really, and I have 100% margins with no taxes, yeah, I can also sponsor Formula One teams or get Drake and create an innovative, social media driven marketing campaign that is targeted to everyone, including underage people. So, let's appreciate that, we're making this market available to them, and they're taking it in an exceptional way. They're doing amazing stuff, and they're taking that opportunity. I don't blame them for doing it. But I think the regulators and legislators really, really soon need to, acknowledge this problem. I mean, and they've had so much time. I mean, look at Germany. It's been years since we were collecting data, and we see, 80% of the gaming market is now served by offshore black operators. So there it is. Like, this is what happens. It's a real life example of when you overregulate, how the market reacts. And unfortunately, regulators are now in a race to create more enforcement. We need to go after, suppliers, and we need to go after even the users. I don't think that's a battle that can be won. Like you can stop Sports Radar or Evolution maybe to serve some customers, but there'll be a spin-off. And,
but don't you think some, so on that note, you mentioned B2B supplier. Isn't that an interesting way to combat the offshore market? Say Evolution, now that reported their Q1 numbers just the other day, that talk about the fact that the regulators are putting pressure on them, not just in the local regulated environment, but also in other European markets, to not serve the operators that are not locally regulated, that are active in those markets. Yeah. So, for example, in Sweden, Evolution is actively shutting off operators that are not locally regulated, which then leaves the players no choice but to play on the regulated operators if they want to enjoy, let's say, they get the best games on the market. Other suppliers are following suit as well, not only publicly traded ones, but some of the biggest game suppliers are now actively shutting off unregulated market players. And casino side, which is such a commoditized product, and if you want to enjoy the best games on the market, you have no option. You have to play on the regulated sites. Isn't that actually a good way to combat?
No, because it's short-termist. It's forcing those offshore operators who have incredible cash flows, who've anticipated that this could happen anytime, to replace those content providers with their own or alternative suppliers. And some of these suppliers, will find ways for their content, to still be distributed. So either that content will find its way through licensing agreements to different subsidiaries or one-time, license sales, or the larger operators will eventually invest enough over time to replicate and even get better content because ultimately they're more profitable and they have a bigger slice of the pie. And going back to Southeast Asia, a lot of the operators have their own live dealer studios, either through joint, licensing agreements of technology or entirely, startup. They realized, instead of, paying millions to, Prag and Evolution, they want to create an alternative, and they're more localized, maybe with local talent, more targeting their local consumer taste. But you're pushing these operators to innovate. You may slow them down. In some cases, even like really, potentially stop. Can you operate a sportsbook today without those data feeds? And are there alternatives in the market? Yes, some. And I wonder if these were forced to stop serving unregulated, unlicensed operators, would there be new ones, especially with AI today, that are going to be able to scrape the data in incredibly efficient ways and deliver the content? And maybe we are in a world where for a year or two, unlicensed operators have 5-second delayed data as opposed to the official feed coming from the official provider of the NBA or Premier League. But it will be very short-termist.
Yeah.
Like I said, in my opinion and also past experience, there's only one way. Your product, you have to measure competitiveness and profit margins and allow the licensed operator, within boundaries, to be able to offer a competitive product. And if you don't, you have the example of Germany, you have the example of Turkey, great, state-operated or licensed products. I think they're like $1 billion a year in GGR. Unlicensed offshore operators, $8 billion.
Mm-hmm.
So are you happy that now you're taxing a little bit and you seem to be, addressing the social issue by, although they have no RG measures on the government product, but like, okay, we're getting this many taxes, it's a legal product, great, but you haven't done anything to stop the actual market.
So the idea is essentially you can thwart the black market temporarily by pulling back, let's say, the most popular products and the most important tools that they use today. But in the long term, what will happen is you have a divided industry with operators and suppliers that are either operating fully regulated or fully black. And eventually the two will catch up with each other. Let's say the black will catch up with the regulated side, and then you're back to
a bit like AI, US, China, NVIDIA,
I was going to say,
blocks,
right? So like US is taking decisions.
If the resources are there and the acknowledgement of the issue is there, you overinvest and you catch up. And let's face it, these are not, rocket science technologies. It wouldn't take an operator that makes $1 billion a year in EBITDA to develop a live dealer studio or buy amazing talent, amazing talent and start developing their own games.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great comparison with the US considering to ban, let's say, all the chips from NVIDIA being shipped into China at the moment with the H100s, which is this like limited version of the most powerful GPUs, and by not allowing China to import any silicon from NVIDIA, that just kind of gives birth to China's race to create the products on their own, essentially. Their own chips.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Brilliant, Sam. I have two bonus questions for you before I leave you here today. We've been going on for quite some time here. I really, really appreciate this conversation.
Okay.
First question is, you're a bit of a brandophile, I suppose. You like brands and brands that stands out. So I want to ask you, what in your opinion are the strongest brands within our industry today? Can you name your 3 favorite brands, the 3 strongest brands that you, in your point of view, in the industry today?
Globally?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
it's hard not to bring in the two big US brands into the mix now. Maybe because they've made so much noise in the last few years, and they went from zero to where they are today in such a short period of time. So obviously we have to mention FanDuel and DraftKings. You could argue maybe slightly in decline, but Bet365 probably remains the most recognizable sports betting brand in the world today. Upcoming brands, certainly worth a mention for Betano and Stake.
Yeah.
And the brands that's sponsoring your chair on the background. I mean, although they're just a content play, you could argue that they are a B2C brand, and it drives people, and people are looking specifically for Prag content. You could say similarly, maybe Evo Live Dealer, but not as much. I think Prag Slots has been a major driver of growth of that segment. So I think we can't see them just as a B2B vendor. I think they're a brand that is now recognized by consumers. At least they're content brands.
Yeah.
That may not be the parent brand, but they're content brands. And these are, becoming very important. So it's not just the operator brands anymore, but in the casino space, like you mentioned earlier, the content and the branding of the content is what drives, customers to a site.
Yeah. And the realization of Pragmatic that it's not just about promoting yourself towards your potential customer operators, but actually to promote yourself towards the end user.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Did I miss any big ones?
No, I think you did. Your observation is quite astute. I was going to ask you where does Stake fit into this mix of DraftKings, FanDuel, and the Bet365, but you answered yourself. I think that you do see them as kind of like one of these up-and-coming brands as well that are establishing themselves, because it's obviously another left field brand.
Yeah. I mean, different mechanics of growth. For sure, and can't say I agree with most, but again, a formidable company that has taken the opportunity and ran with it.
Yeah, for sure. Final question for you today, Sam. If you could put together a dinner of industry legends, of 5 industry legends that you would like to have a night out with, let's say a bit of a messy dinner somewhere in central London, perhaps, who would you choose at your dinner table?
That is so much pressure. But
you told me I could ask anything.
Well, I'd have to go back and put together our Bet and Win, Bwin Mafia. And so I'd have to go with Norbert Teufelberger, Manfred Bordner, Joachim Baja. I wonder who I'm missing there. Like, I'd want to go back in time and have a nostalgic conversation around the early days of the business and the challenges, but also the opportunities and the growth of the industry. And, as much as I've been in this industry, let's not forget I've been in a single company for a long time. So my exposure has been very internal to the industry. So I have to go with those legends. So it's a small dinner. Apologies. It's not like this big, 10, 15 person. And I'm obviously omitting all the various, Hall of Famers of our industry, from the Mark Blanfords of this world, or Joe Carruthers and all those legends that I know. But, I'd want to just go back to the nostalgic days of Bet and Win and Bwin and the Real Madrid projects and relive those moments.
Amazing. We keep the circle small. I like it. Sam, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. The best episodes are those that time just fly away from us, and that was certainly the case today. We've gone over time, and that's a good sign, I think. Thank you so much for donating your time here today, Sam, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in Malta next week, by the way. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much. See you soon.